Welcome to the Aerospace Executive Podcast, featuring in-depth conversations with executives, leaders, influencers, and journalists in this dynamic, high-stakes industry. Hosted by Craig Picken, founder of North Star Group, the boutique executive search firm for the aerospace industry. You'll learn how top aerospace executives are developing their people, competing for talent, overcoming challenges, and adjusting to industry trends to drive growth and profits. And now, let's join your host, Craig Picken.
Hey, welcome back to the Aerospace Executive Podcast. Hey, I'm thrilled to have Richard Emery on with me today. Richard's an old friend who I've known for the better part of 10 years. He's a former senior executive with Hawker Beechcraft. He was president of their international and president of the Americas Group. He held senior roles with Gulfstream Aircraft as the vice president of sales. He started his career with Bombardier Business Aircraft in a sales role, and he's been integral to the industry for a long time. So thanks for coming on, Richard.
Craig, thanks for having me. Yeah, I even go beyond Bombardier to Canadair, if you can believe that.
We just dated ourselves now.
Yes, we did.
So all good. Well, hey, thanks for coming on. So obviously a lot of news in business aviation with Wheels Up acquiring Gamma Aviation and recently acquiring Delta Private Jets. VistaJet and ExoJet are now one entity or pseudo one entity. How do you see all this? How do you see all this playing out?
Well, it's very interesting. To see what Kenny has done with Wheels Up and where they've gone with their strategy. It's kind of fascinating. But probably not terribly unexpected because the industry is mature. And when you get into a mature industry, you have to have consolidation. And you really need, economies of scale to be competitive. So I think what we're seeing here is a race towards economy of scale to try to be able to compete in the marketplace. And obviously, Kenny he wants to take the democratization of flying to a different level. And what he's done with Delta and Gamma and travel management seems to be heading in that direction.
So you played a big role in selling him his initial order of King Air 350s back in the day. I got to think, the King Air is not a cheap airplane. It's $7 million for a twin engine turboprop. And I got to think though that making money off of that aircraft has got to be challenging. I understood the regionalization of it, of Wheels Up when it started, but it seems like they started branching out more and more. What do you think the strategy is good of them acquiring some additional operators, getting some more jet lift? And does he start to abandon the King Air, the King Air, foundation?
I still believe that for what they're trying to do, the King Air is a good platform. If you set the economics aside from the acquisition, which, that was kind of a house deal. So that was being done, at levels above me, although I was a part of that. But the platform really works for Kenny because, a big part of his membership are lifestyle people at the moment, right? And these are folks that, to put it in context of where I live in Dallas, these are guys that, might want to get 8 guys and get on an airplane and fly to the Alotian Club in Arkansas to play golf for a couple of days and then fly back, or to fly to a football game, or, to Colorado. So for that, the platform, because of the cost of operating, I think it's a good platform for them for that regional travel. It'll be interesting to see as they expand their footprint here, what replaces that, because with the Excel and the King Air, you really still don't have, an airplane that's that's made to kind of do the coast to coast type stuff. And that may be where the charter piece comes in. Travel management, we worked with them too while I was at Hawker Beach, and they're a big operator of the beach jet. And so, again, you have another very regionally based operator there. So
Right.
it'll be interesting to see how they make all of this work together.
So now you got Wheels Up, which acquired Gamma, which and Delta private jets, and Delta basically made a big investment in Wheels Up, and for Wheels Up to fold DPJ into its umbrella. You've got NetJets and EJM, which is the big dog on the block. You've got FlexJet and VistaJet with ExoJet. How do you see room for the other guys, the 110 aircraft charter management companies like Clay Lacy, Solaris, Jet Aviation to a little bit of a bigger degree? Do you see two distinct markets? Do you see all these guys starting to fold into each other? Jet Select and Jet Edge just merged as well.
Yes.
Do you see these? Do you see a divide between how these companies operate, or do you see more of a frenemy type of environment, or quite frankly, do you see more of an Uberization of aircraft charter management now, where these guys all start to talk to each other and they just they send the closest jet to the customer to eliminate the deadhead?
Well, that's interesting because since the advent of Uber, everybody's been trying to get there, right? Everybody's been trying to create a system that works along the lines of Uber. How many apps have we seen that have come and gone? I was involved with a group here in Dallas that their initial concept was to be the Uber of aviation. It became Rise, which began operating King Airs on the old Southwest routes.
Okay.
And then they were acquired by Surf Air. So
Okay.
I think what you're going to see here is continued consolidation. Certainly the independent large aircraft management groups do a very good job for their customers and are continuing to grow, but they're now getting to a level to where do you go? It seems to me that a management group can really work well if you're kind of in that 20 to 30 airplane and under. And then you get in lost a little bit, and then you get to this kind of 100 airplane and over piece where you start to develop economies of scale. But I suspect that before this cycle is over with, you'll see some more consolidation, and you'll see some people pull those organizations in under their umbrella.
Right. So let's shift gears now. Let's take out the democratization of business aviation, and let's talk how all this is going to affect the OEMs. Do we now have to see a standardization of platforms across the across the groups? Do you have to see a couple long range? Hey, look, the charter management companies want, and the fractional companies, they want large cabin. They want some super mids, maybe some some mids. And they really don't make any money off the small jets from a charter standpoint. So do you have to start? Do the OEMs, start to meet the charter management company needs, or are they still going to be able to build to what they think their customers are going to, their individual customers are going to want?
Well, it's a balancing act, but certainly I think the landscape is changing a bit on them. And, it used to be where you signed, a fractional contract and you had a long-term vision as to what your production for them were going to be. And you added that to the production schedule, and it was kind of an addition to whatever you were planning on building. That all ended when we went off the cliff in the last cycle because the fractional guys didn't take their delivery positions. So I would suspect that this is causing the OEMs to have to think about what their model looks like going forward. And, do they create an alliance with an operator? Do they go out and, it's very interesting to think about, would an OEM go out and invest in one of these operations in order to create, a consistent demand in the production backlog for their products and give their, and get access to an entirely new customer base than what they're used to dealing with.
Right. Well, obviously, Bombardier made some pretty big investments in FlexJet back in the late 1990s, and they ran that for what 10 years before they 10, 12 years before they sold it off to to Kenny or to Ken Rickey.
Yeah.
Look from a lot of standpoint, I understood. People told me they had by far the best operation as far as customer service, quality jets, et cetera. But I know it was pretty tough for them, and they ended up essentially giving it away. So do you think Textron or Gulfstream or anybody wants to go back to that? Go back and try that again?
Well, it may not be so much of an ownership piece as it would be some sort of a joint venture, or a similar structure, which gives them an outlet, on the airplane. I mean, if you can imagine, if you could kind of put your forward thinking cap on and say, gosh, if I'm a guy and I'm in this next generation of people that are now creating enough wealth that I have access to private transportation, a lot of these people have come out of the sharing economy.
Right.
And they don't necessarily, ownership may not be what they're thinking. I think that's been a big driver of VistaJet and VistaJet acquiring ExoJet. But, if a manufacturer could align themselves with somebody that could provide a customer with a new airplane to operate for 5 years while mitigating, residual value and maintenance downside, and then continue to be a part of that airplane for the next 2 to 3 owners. And you look at the life cycle of the asset from a 15 to 20 year basis versus, what we typically look at as a 7-year life cycle for an owner. It could be pretty interesting. There's you think about General Dynamics, they own Jet Aviation and Gulfstream.
Right.
Large operator, large manager of airplanes. They have bases all over the world. You have Gulfstream, who's arguably the premier manufacturer in the business right now. I mean, it seems to me that there should be some synergy there as we start to see the use of private jets migrate from ownership to, I want access but I don't necessarily want to take on the headache of full ownership.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like a little bit of, I'll go to the car industry, a little bit of a Ford and Ford Credit, where, Ford Motor Company is selling to the customer, who's then borrowing the money from Ford Credit. So the transaction actually occurs. It's a little bit of an in-house deal. You can securitize some of the, some of the financial aspects with some third-party, third-party risk takers. But at the end of the day, you inject some capital back into the OEM. You've got some alternative financing strategies, and the customer essentially is, he's stroking a check every year, every month, or however it works. But he's got a level of airplane that he or she wants without actually taking the ownership of it.
Well, and obviously there are a lot of different factors in that. I mean, certainly there's tax issues in there that might drive somebody to ownership once they do their cash flow analysis versus leasing or renting an airplane. But when you talk about the car business, there are two very large dealer organizations here in Dallas that are now running a program where you have 3 tiers that you can buy in at different monthly rental levels that give you access to 6, 7, 8 different vehicles in each tier. So if you need a sedan during the week, you drive a sedan. You're going to go out to you're going to haul kids around on the weekend. You take the sedan, or they come and drop off an SUV and take the sedan away.
Right.
And you're paying one fee, and that covers insurance and use of any of those vehicles for a 24-month contract. And it's interesting because what the car dealers are doing is they're using those cars for 2 years, and then they turn around and sell them as, dealer operated, dealer maintained used cars at the end of 2 years, which gives them better margin contribution.
Right.
Than they do selling the car new.
Yep.
So, is that model a model that could work in the business jet world? I don't know, but I do think that we are seeing that the service side of the business and business aviation is now a significantly more important contributor to to the bottom line for these OEMs than the front end sales side.
Right.
There's been such a compression of pricing for these airplanes because, quite frankly, you have too many models, and you probably have 1 or 2 too many manufacturers, and so it's become commoditized, and therefore what you want to do is capture the customer, knowing that you're going to get a lower margin contribution on the front end, but you're going to get a higher margin contribution through your service network and other ways to feed into that customer.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, it's as one guy said to me a long time ago. He says, "Look, everybody makes a great airplane. Bombardier makes a great airplane. Gulfstream makes a good airplane. Falcon Jet, etc. Everybody makes a really good airplane, and the margin of difference between them is, what does the customer like? And that's when everybody's selling a very high quality product, you're right. It almost becomes commoditized on a different level. Who's doing it right? I mean, who do you think from a business standpoint out there? Who do you really like? Who's doing it right? Obviously, Bombardier's had a little bit of a struggle. Recently, Gulfstream seems to keep cranking along. Now the G700 is coming out. Cessna's been a pretty good franchise. Embraer makes a good airplane. Who you betting on right now? Who do you think's doing it right? And where did we go from here? That's the question: is where do you go from here from a product standpoint?
Well, and that's a great question. From kind of sitting outside the lines and looking back in now, it seems to me that Gulfstream you know, Gulfstream and Textron are kind of the two dominant players in their spaces. Both of them, have very large organizations behind them, which gives them the ability to have capital to invest in order to continue to separate themselves from their competitors.
Right.
Gulfstream, they've invested, $2 billion in Savannah over the last 5 to 7 years. Remarkable facilities there. They continue to expand their service footprint. They continue to offer new and different services to their customer, their product.
Right.
I was brought up under some folks in this industry that were big believers in the fact that support sells airplanes. And the two, companies right now that have the best opportunity to support their customers are Textron and Gulfstream.
Yep.
And so they continue to get pretty significant share of the market. Bombardier, it will be interesting to see now that they're out on their own with the divestiture of the rail and the airline piece to see how they do with just business aviation as their revenue generator.
Yep.
They have very good products. The Challenger 350 is leader in its class. The Global 7500, the 6500. I mean, the 7500 is a remarkable airplane. The 6500 and the 5500 are very good airplanes, probably a little long in the tooth. From a platform standpoint. That's where, again, Gulfstream has an advantage. They've been able to make the investment in R&D to bring out new platforms.
Right.
So it will be interesting to see how Bombardier does. Can they make the kind of investment in continuing research and development, in growing their product support footprint, bringing new services to their customers to be able to maintain share and profitability, especially once we go into, the recessionary environment, which certainly is coming. I don't think anybody really knows when, but, you could pontificate that it's in the next 24 months.
It's a cyclical market. I mean, it's a cyclical market.
Yeah. And how deep is that going to be?
Right.
Right. Then you have kind of Embraer out there that I think is a head scratcher.
Yep.
They dominate the market with the 300. You don't know what their margin profile looks like with that airplane. They've brought two, the Praetor 500 and 600, I think. I don't know if I ever get that word right. But they've brought those airplanes to market and to kind of a lukewarm reception, it seems to me. You just don't see a lot of momentum there. And I might be missing it, but from the people that I talk to in observing the market, I haven't really seen a lot of momentum behind that product. And with the Boeing investment and then the troubles that Boeing are having now, you kind of wonder what all that means for that organization going forward.
Yeah, look, it's a challenge. They've got a challenge ahead of them as well. The Phenom 300 at $10 million. The margins on that. I don't know what a green airplane is. What kind of margins a green airplane is going to make for them. Maybe 15%, $1.5 million. It seems like a hard way to make a living. But on the flip side too, Gulfstream just came out with the G700, so. You can't get, they've got a very long range airplane now, very fast, very long range airplane. What's next? Where do you can't go any bigger because then you're into a Boeing. Maybe you can go faster. Then you're into the supersonic, which Aerion is doing. If you're in a product development role, where do you tell your people to focus? Is it big cabin, small aircraft like you and I were talking at one point about the premiere at Hawker Beechcraft, or do you focus more on the supersonic that takes people across the ocean in 3 hours?
Well, I do believe that we're kind of running out to the end of the cabin size versus range spectrum. To your point, because you basically have MD-80s, bigger than MD-80s, sitting on the ramp now, right? So you have airline size airplanes sitting on the ramp now that are marvelous performing machines. The ability to, get into an airplane and go 7,000 miles at, 8.5 or 8.8 or wherever they are today, that's incredible. However, that cabin, I don't care who you are, that cabin, that's a spending 16, 17 hours in those cabins is a long time to be in the cabins.
No doubt.
They've made them very comfortable. They've brought they brought the cabin altitude down to where it makes a significant difference. They're putting different kind of air recycle machines in the airplane so that you're getting fresh air. They're doing a lot of things very right to make that as palatable as they can. But I really believe that I think you've got a tiered relationship here. I think in your bigger cabin, larger cabin airplanes, the next frontier is definitely speed. And then in the smaller cabin, I think it's probably how do we get more comfort in those cabins while maintaining price point and performance. Balanced field length, altitude, performance, speed, while having the ability to move around a little bit more. It was interesting. There was an article a couple of weeks ago, I guess, where I'm going to forget the airline, but they were able to do they hit the time of year right, and an airline flew from New York to London in 4 hours and 20 minutes.
Yeah, I saw that. They had the fastest time ever. I think it was a 747 400.
They showed up 2 hours before they were supposed to. But that's a game changer. If you can start going back and forth over the Atlantic or the Pacific, and you can start doing a 4-hour trip to New York, London, New York, Berlin, New York, Frankfurt, Paris, that really starts to become a game changer. And that's why I feel like the guys that are in product development are probably looking at ways to increase speed. And let's not forget that there's a huge drive right now for sustainability.
Right.
And they have to continue to try to figure out how to make their airplanes have a smaller carbon footprint, and to contribute back more to the sustainability piece, because that optically is not going away, and they're going to have to satisfy those requirements if they want to operate in Europe. I think eventually in North America, and probably lastly in the Middle East and Asia. But that's a very significant factor now in European operations.
Do you think that that's a fad, or do you think that's really an ongoing concern?
That's a very good question. I do think it's an ongoing concern. I don't think it's going away. Now, do I believe that you won't be allowed to fly into a country if you haven't met a very restrictive requirement concerning sustainability? I don't think that they'll ever get there. The question is what is the penalty?
Right.
Um, and um, and that's going to be the interesting piece. But I do not think that's going away.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching it. I mean, obviously, a lot of pressure. Everybody, even Larry Fink up at BlackRock,
Yeah,
is talking about it now, and he's got two big cabin airplanes he flies, and I think that they're trying to do everything they can to offset that. So, if he's pushing the lead, maybe maybe the OEMs do have to answer to that. To that.
and I mean, look, it sounds to me like they're making tremendous, progress on biofuel.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly don't have the manufacturing capacity that they need yet to be able to make that a regular thing. But I mean, everywhere there's an opportunity, there's an entrepreneur that's looking at how to exploit that opportunity, and
Yep.
and they will get there with that, and that will be significant. And of course, I think you'll have carbon exchanges and carbon offsets and that sort of thing that will help. But I really don't think it's going away. I mean, there are manufacturers out there that are that are thinking about offering carbon offsets with the purchase of the airplane. And do you plant however many trees for every airplane you sell, or something along those lines? And that's I think that's probably here to stay.
Certainly, yeah. Hey, look, it's certainly it gives you a competitive edge to sell your airplane, right? Hey,
Yes.
it's one less objection that somebody can give you. If sustainability is a big point, we'll figure out how to make your airplane more carbon neutral. Also it's like you said, the opportunity for World Fuel and some of the other fuel providers to develop a market is definitely there. My guess is it's going to be a little more expensive than your average operator wants to pay at first, but that'll come to, those prices will come down too.
Yeah, it probably will flow the way that it typically flows, which is the single citation owner isn't going to buy biofuel if they don't have to. The large multinational flight departments will.
Right.
So, and it will flow down from the top down as things often do. But going back to your original question, going kind of away from sustainability, Craig, I really believe that speed is kind of the next frontier here. I mean, does that mean supersonic or does that mean 9.9? And there are so many hurdles to overcome with supersonic, especially when it comes to flying over land, not just mitigating the sonic boom, but what does that do environmentally? I really think that the lesser concern with supersonic technology is with the FAA, and the greater concern is with the EPA.
You're probably right. I mean, it's interesting, at Aviation, people don't really understand the challenges of building a supersonic jet. Now, I know they got the engine technology, and that was just one challenge is, hey, what's this engine going to look like? How do we manufacture that profitably? But how do we stuff it into a fuselage, so it can meet noise abatement rules?
Yep.
And how do you minimize, a sonic boom as it goes across the ocean or, across land if it meets, if it goes over 1.0. So, yeah, there's a lot of challenges there. I mean, I think, hey, look, the military is a different animal. You don't have to worry about profitability. You don't have to worry about, the EPA, but, you start to think about a business jet. That is a phenomenal undertaking.
It really is, and I think it begs the question: is it going to be driven from business aviation up, or is it going to be driven from airlines down? And there's a lot of speculation around Boeing and Airbus, being pretty far down the road on supersonic technology to bring back a supersonic airliner.
Mm-hmm.
The guys out of Boston didn't quite get there, but certainly Boeing has the resources for that. And as a platform, that I don't think that we lose sight of the fact that a platform like that probably becomes pretty appealing in the government sector.
Yep.
And so people have asked me, do you really believe Aerion could sell enough airplanes to make that a viable program? I firmly believe they can. I firmly believe that the market is there when you start looking not only at military applications, government applications, and commercial applications.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think about when I'm thinking about supersonic is 1.3 or 1.4 enough to make a difference?
That's a good point.
In other words, if you have to make all sorts of sacrifices and you've got $120 million platform or $130 million platform, whatever the number is going to be, and you can go 1.3 or 1.4 from New York to London, if Gulfstream comes in behind you
Mm-hmm.
and figures out a way to make a G650 go cruise at 9.8 or 9.9, then that probably changes the competitive landscape quite a bit.
Yep. No,
So,
I agree with you.
Yeah. So, because you still have the big cabin, you still have the range, you don't have the mitigation of the sonic boom, that sort of thing. And Gulfstream could probably undercut you by $30-40 million a copy.
Right. Yeah.
That's to me, the EPA and is 1.4, whatever they're claiming they can do now at Aerion, enough. Keep in mind, the Concorde was much faster than that.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's kind of the interesting calculus in that market.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And that's going to be the big thing is, speed comes at a cost. Are people willing to pay for the speed? And that's going to be, I was talking to one analyst and he said, hey, look, we see a market for 300 Aerions over 10 years. Hey, look, that's a pretty good number at $125-150 million each. That's a big market. What's got you most excited right now in the short term?
I just think it's going to be very interesting to see how the new airplane users decide to move forward with how they use business aviation. There will always be a place for business aviation, and there will always be people who want to own and operate their own airplane, and they want their own people and they want their own stuff on the airplane when they walk on the airplane. That's never going away. I don't think that it's going to grow as fast as the production capability that all of the OEMs have now. So that's going to create some tension somewhere along the line.
Right.
But I'm fascinated by watching guys like Kenny and guys like Thomas Floor at VistaJet and the NetJets of the world, and seeing where they're going. Because I just don't think that the traditional model is going to give them the growth that they need to be successful and to mitigate the investments they've had to make these acquisitions.
Right.
So it's, you really have to expand that market. And that's what Kenny and that's what Thomas is trying to do.
Right.
The key to me is if somebody can figure out a way to allow somebody to have access to this is important, their airplane, while mitigating residual value and maintenance risk, that's exciting. That becomes, in my mind, that changes the landscape of how business aircraft will be used, and therefore it will change the landscape of how the manufacturers look at the market going forward.
Yeah, so it's a little less about the airplane, a little bit more about how the airplane is kind of delivered to the customer from the manufacturer, from an OEM.
Yeah, it's you kind of boil it down to the basics. It's how are these aircraft going to be consumed? Is it fractional? Is it charter? Is it some version in there that's a little bit of both? You find a lot of times that in that charter market that companies are making promises on charter that they can't keep.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes a disappointment to the owner. And they oftentimes wind up getting out and going back to a use model.
Yep.
Any way you slice it, flying is not inexpensive. There has to be a need for it. There's certainly a lot of need as we expand economically, across the globe, and the desire to be face to face. It's funny, back when I started in this industry, the big threat was teleconferencing, right? The big threat was going to be video conferencing. Everybody's going to stop flying because you didn't have to.
Right.
Business has proven that face-to-face is still the best way to do business. You still have to go see your facilities. You have to see your people. You have to meet with your customers. Deals don't get done, on a video conference.
Totally agree.
The need is there. It's how's it going to be used going forward? Yeah.
It's certainly an interesting, look, it's going to be an interesting business case, but at the end of the day, the business jet isn't going away either. So, it'll be fun to see how it all shakes out over the next couple of years with a new buyer.
Yep, certainly. And it'll be interesting to see if we go through a recessionary environment, what it looks like coming out on the other end.
Absolutely. Well, hey, look, let's do this. Let's hold it from here, and let's come back in 6 months and see where 2020 is taking the industry. How's that sound?
That'd be terrific. I'd enjoy doing that.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for coming on, Richard. Enjoyed having you today.